Hello and welcome to our recorded session of the Orders and Invoicing webinar. Today we'll be covering a couple topics as far as ordering, invoicing, reports in manufacturer forms. So I will go ahead and get started here. The first step to the process is just going to be selecting a patient in your browser. Once you've got them pulled up, you'll want to go over to their hearing aids tab. At the bottom here, you'll notice it says Order New Aid. If we click on this, it should bring us to this Select Aids and Options section. So here we have all of our hearing aids available to sell. The first thing you'll want to make sure is that you have a prescriber and a fitter set up at the bottom here. Once done, you can select from this manufacturer dropdown. So once we've got that set up, we can type in the model in our quick find just to narrow things down a bit more. Once we highlight the aid we're looking for, we can set the left and right ears down here just by clicking these buttons. At this point, you can add color or notes if you need to here. And then if you need to adjust the billing location, and if there is an insurer-specific item you're looking to add, you can select from these menus as well. If you do maintain inventory in your system and you'd like to add an aid from stock, you can select stock items. And then you would just drag and drop to set those up here. Otherwise, we can move forward. Next section is going to be other manufacturer items, otherwise known as orderable items in your system. So these are going to be similar to accessories, but just accessory items that you need to place an order through the manufacturer for, versus a walk-in item that you might always have on hand at the clinic. So in here, we can just select the Starkey remote, add as other. And then once we've got everything here, we can move into services, batteries, and accessories. So in here, you can just double click to add any of these items. And then that will bring us to the allocate cost section once we've got everything placed. Here, you'll want to make sure you have everything included as far as the date, location, provider, and so forth here. Underneath order items, you can make changes here just by clicking the gray X to remove, or just clicking into any of these different fields to adjust pricing. If you want to add a discount to a line item, you can double click here. And it's always going to require that you set up a reason for that. And then this will always go by dollar amount. So if we wanted to add a $10 discount, that should adjust things. And then tax should be built into your system on the back end. So if you do set up tax for an item, you can see here in this case, Minnesota state tax automatically calculated. So you can kind of make changes there if needed as well. Once we have everything set up here, if you need to add a note to your order form, you can click into this note section and add as needed. If the patient decides that they're not quite ready to move forward with purchasing yet, you can click create quotes, and that should generate an estimate form. So if we pull this up, you can see it should have your logo and clinic information in your own system, but we've got all of our order information included here. So you could email or fax this off to the patient, or you can archive it. So this might be helpful if you have a patient that's kind of undecided. If you ever are working with forms and you want to keep things more organized, you can always set up the category notes and status just with where you're at with things. But once we save this, we can close out. And if we go back to the Documents tab, we've got our quote form here. So this usually comes in handy just so that you don't have to regenerate the order and set it up with every individual item to have that form. You can just grab it here and send it as needed. If they do want to move forward right away, we can just save the order. It'll always ask you if you want to generate an order form. If we say yes, you'll see here that we've got quite a few manufacturer forms, which we'll kind of touch base a little bit more on in a bit. But if we grab the generic one, depending on the form and how that's set up, it's going to ask you for different information. This isn't necessarily required, so I'm just going to move past that. We can see we've got all of our information here. Same thing with email, faxing, or saving at the bottom. If we go back to the hearing aids tab, since we've placed our order, we can see it's in ordered status here. And if you click on an item, you'll notice down in this history section, it typically logs the date of any change that's made in that ordering process, just so you can kind of look back on when everything was set up. So now that we've got our order placed, we can right click, and the next step is going to be receiving the items in. So we've placed the order, we've received the items at the clinic. At this point, if you are integrated with QuickBooks and you'd like to keep track of your manufacturer bills, you can receive items with the bill. If not, you can just receive. So at this point, we can enter in our manufacturer invoice number here. If you do have a barcode scanner with the USB port, that should work fine with Blueprint. If you prefer to scan those serial numbers in, you can do so at the bottom. Otherwise, we can just enter them manually in the serial number columns. And then you can adjust batteries. And this cost that you see here is going to be the cost that you paid for the items on the clinic end versus the patient price. So that's one thing to note. That's also going to flow into QuickBooks if you want to keep tabs on that. And then you can adjust your warranty, loss and damage dates here, as well as the color or notes. So once we've got that filled out, expense items is going to be another place where you can add any additional cost that was charged for the clinic. So things like shipping costs. You can add that here, and again, that will flow through to QuickBooks. We can save now that we've got everything included. So now we can see that our Phonak aids switched over to received. And because this remote was placed under Starkey, we're probably going to be receiving that at a different time. So we typically will receive that separately. One thing to note is you'll want to make sure that you have everything on the order that you placed initially received in order to invoice it. So everything has to be in receive status before you're able to deliver and activate the hearing aids. So we can do the same thing for the remote. Receive with bill. Again, I'm entering placeholders, so obviously none of this is accurate. Once we've got this, same thing. We've got everything in received status, so once we're ready to invoice these, we can right click and we have the option now to deliver all items. So we placed our order, received the items at the clinic. Now we're ready to deliver these off to the patient. We can select our fitter here. And now we can see we're able to create the invoice at the bottom. So here you'll want to make sure you make any final changes that you need to. Otherwise, we can create the invoice. And that should normally populate your invoice form. Not sure what the error message is there, but we can see that our hearing aids are active, and then your invoice form should normally pop up with all of the information that was on that order. And then we can see the history of that process down here. So now if we go over to sales history, we can see we've got our sale. Anytime you do see this caution sign, that will typically mean there's a balance on file. So we can see the patient in this case is owing $3,070. If you do want to take a payment on that, we would just normally right click, receive payment. Here you can adjust the date. You can add a note to the memo line if you need to. We'll select our payment method. If we receive a check, we can enter in that check number in the reference number box here, and then we can save. And then again, that should normally bring up your invoice form, reflecting that payment information here. So now that caution sign has been removed, we're all paid out and good to go. So that is usually kind of the full process on ordering and then invoicing. The next thing I'll kind of cover is returns. So let's say this patient wanted to return this order. We can right click on our sale. You'll have the option to return to manufacturer or stock. So in this case, let's just say manufacturer. At this point, you'll always need to select the return reasons as to why they are no longer wanting the items. So we can do that here. And then sometimes clinics will have return fees added. If you want to zero those out, you certainly can. And then once we've got everything set up here, we'll notice that this is going to be creating a credit for the patient. So we can return. And then at this point, it will ask you if you want to issue a refund. So if you click no, you would just basically have to go back into your sales history and right-click on the payment and issue that refund manually. If we want it to just do it from the screen, we can click yes. So here, again, just setting up the date, refund method with whatever we sent back. And then that should update things here. And then we have our return for credit forms if we need to generate those. So we can close this out. And now we can see that our refund was created, and then the return credit covered the balance since that payment was refunded, just to cover everything and balance things out. So that's typically how a return would work. The next thing I'll cover is just repair orders. So let's say I had a remote in this case that I needed to send for repair. To do that, I would just right-click on the item, send for repair, and then you'll have the option to select the reason for repair as well as the type. Once I click next and go to this allocate cost section, if you are planning to enter a charge for the repair, you can do so here and save the order. Again, your manufacturer forms should come up, in this case with Starkey, if you need those. I'll just maybe kind of show you guys what one of those looks like here. Again, I'll kind of go a little deeper on how these work in a bit, but you can see that this is a Starkey repair form. So you'd be able to email or fax it as needed as well, either to the manufacturer or as needed. But once we send the item for repair, we can see that status switched over to sent for repair. So this kind of works similar to that ordering process. You're gonna have to receive and deliver once more. So once we receive the repair back from the manufacturer, again, we can keep track of that bill if you needed here. And enter the serial numbers if they were updated. And save. So we received them at the clinic, and then you'll have to just right click and deliver once more. Again, setting up your fitter here. And then if we create the invoice for that $50, it should include the repair charge. So if we go back to sales history, we can see that we've got our repair order here with a balance of $50. So that kind of covers repairs. Next thing is going to be manufacturer forms. So typically the way that works in Blueprint is each year when there are updates to the manufacturer forms, we usually receive those and update them in your systems free of charge. That should roll out automatically whenever we are able to kind of update those on our end. And then depending on the manufacturer you place your order for, in this case Starkey, if you just right click on the item, you can see all of your Starkey forms here. And depending on the status, you'll have different forms. So like before, when we were in repair status, you had your Starkey repair form specifically. Because we've activated the the remote, you'll have just your general order forms here. So basically, if you need to access those, you can just right click and grab whatever you need here. And again, we do usually receive these from the manufacturer, so they should look pretty nice to use and send off to whoever might need those. Your information as far as account numbers and so forth should auto reflect on there if there are any discrepancies. again, just let us know and we can work on fixing that for you. And then if there are certain manufacturer forms that you're missing, you can always just send in a ticket and we can take a further look at that. And then the last thing I just had was reports. So we do have quite a few reports in Blueprint, depending what you're looking for. So I'll just kind of do a brief overview of some of the more popular financial reports. To access those, you can click this Tools Reports dropdown. So we've got a few different AR reports in different financial reporting, depending what you're looking for. I won't go too far in depth, just for time's sake, but if you are in here, you can kind of hover over these different photos to take a look at how that will look on your end. And then there should be descriptions underneath each report, kind of letting you know what that will pull. So you can kind of play around in here depending what you need. One report that we use a lot is the sales report. So if you just type in this quick find, we can see that here. A lot of the formatting as far as these reports go is going to be pretty similar as far as being able to run an Excel file or PDF at the top here. Typically you'll be able to enter in a date range to specify kind of when you're looking to break things down. And then there should be a few options as far as grouping different things. In this case, you can group it by day or week. Show details, that's just going to either include or disclude just a few more things if you were to, versus if you were to say no. And then you can filter by clinic location, provider, and then transaction type if you only wanted to look at your payments for a certain period or whatever it may be. You can do that here. And then you can also choose whether or not you want to include insurer versus patient transactions or all of them. If you do want to select out of these lists, you'll notice that it says select none to include all providers. Let's say I only wanted to filter someone in particular. You can just press Control-C on your keyboard, and that should allow you to select either one or multiple from the list if you need to. So once I have everything filtered as I want, I can run this. Here I can see it gives you kind of a breakdown here. And then if you flip through, you can see transactions for each location and date and so forth here. Usually, if you do keep tabs on those transaction IDs, that makes things a little easier as far as kind of tracking different things and finding different transactions. You'll notice if we go to sales history here, transaction IDs are always going to be found in this column. You can also search by transaction ID or, invoice number in your browser if you ever need to kind of take a further look if you're seeing which patient a certain transaction belongs to and so forth. So if we do flip through, another thing I'll mention with the transaction IDs, if you are creating support tickets, if you do include that, it usually makes things easier for our technical team to reference the transactions in the database if that ID is included. But if we do flip to this last page, you'll notice that we have our grand totals here. So it'll kind of give you a full breakdown on this last page. And you can always get to that by clicking this arrow here towards the right. So that's just one example. We also have the sales by income account report. That'll break things down by income account if you're kind of looking to specify further. Let's see. And then, yeah, I think you can do the AR reports by insurer versus patient and so forth. So it is just kind of a lot of playing around, but that formatting should be pretty similar, and you'll have the descriptions in here for each individual report. So that concludes today's session. Hopefully we're going to continue to do these webinars just to kind of check in, see how people are doing, do refreshers on different things So if you do have any questions, hopefully today's session was helpful. You can always reach out to us through our support line or through a ticket. Thank you for listening.